You know how we always think about like aliens? I'm not saying whether or not aliens exist, but like if extraterrestrials exist, we always
Mhm.
talk about or portray in media how they'd come down and they'd have all this advanced technology and be really just crazy. What if like Earth is the most civilized planet that exists in the universe and like other planets would come here and just absolutely be blown away by like the Snuggie or the Slap Chop? Do you ever think about that?
Uh, Not in that sense. I never thought about just like the aliens seeing Earth and thinking, "Wow, what they do is so cool," because ultimately they're the ones with the spaceships that made
Yeah,
it
I
all the
guess in
way
this
here.
scenario, we'd have to travel there or something. Like we
Well,
just have to end up by accident.
it could just be that they figured out how to make a spaceship, but they haven't figured out TV. You know what I mean? Maybe we went the
So
TV
weird.
route, then they figured out the spaceship route. So
Yeah. I, I
could
I
be like
think
a
about
good
this
idea.
every time somebody says something like the internet was a mistake. I'm like, what if we used our brain? Like, what if we are the most advanced society that's ever existed, but we just used our brain power for who knows,
It's
dumb stuff.
possible. Could be like this podcast. Welcome back to another episode of Working on the Dad Pod. As always, I am Ethan, and this is my co host, Alex. Today, we are going to be working on going out guilt, the GOG, if you will. But before we get into that, uh, please make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on YouTube. Make sure to hit the notifications button so you know that when new episodes are posted. If you prefer to the audio only version because you're not liking how my face looks tonight, that's fine too. You can get this anywhere you subscribe to your podcasts. But before we get into tonight's topic, before we get gogging out, let's do story time. Alex, how are you and what's your story?
I was doing a lot better before we made an acronym out of going out slash guilt, which is how we had titled it in the brainstorm document, aka guilt associated with going out. And yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
there's a lot to
Hmm.
unpack, but I am doing great, and I would like to bring the energy tonight because I'm excited for this. We're going out, man. But I'm excited for this topic because we've mentioned this on the podcast, but in 2 weeks' time from when we are recording this, Ethan and I will be on a guys trip, and guys trips are awesome. We like them. We like going on vacations, but we like going on vacation with friends too. Not just our kids and packing car seats and diapers and all the fun stuff we get to pack with kids. But we like going out with friends, and it's the first time that I think Ethan and our college roommates have all gotten together for a while, for a
Yeah.
couple of years because we've all had kids. My daughter's the oldest. I think we've got one sub 1 year old, just barely, and
Mhm.
maybe like one right around one. And yeah, so it's a big range, but getting the guys together. I guess we've got one new baby, but that was a surprise baby. He doesn't count because he's not coming on the trip.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. I don't remember the last time the four of us were together, actually,
yeah,
now that I think about it.
it's probably a wedding.
Probably a wedding.
Yeah.
One of theirs.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
anyway, we're
Yeah.
excited to go, and I'm excited to talk about the topic. But as you mentioned, story time. To I had really two instances this week of being a proud nerd dad. Um,
Nice.
I you hear Ethan and I talk about sports plenty and craft beer and working out and all the typical brotastic things that we love, but we also are a couple of guys who will chat it up about Star Wars or Marvel or all sorts of Game of Thrones. You name the nerd culture topic. I can't say we're in all of them, but we have a lot of those kind of nerdy interests. And
Mm-hmm.
this sort of dovetails with, just like a parental pride thing where, when you see in media or books and content for young kids, which I guess is also media, but
Mhm,
those
mhm,
kind of things where they talk about jobs, right? And I feel like when we
mhm.
were kids, it was always like police officers, firefighters, doctors, those kinds of things. And my daughter had a book that's called the You Can Be ABCs, and it's a more modern version of this. And it goes
Mhm.
through the things, and it goes A through Z of maybe some more modern professions. Not all of them are like obviously doctors and lawyers and police officers and teachers and all the, common things still exist. But she gets to W and she goes, web developer. Daddy, that's you. And for those
Nice.
that don't know, that is what I do for a living. And it was just a very cool moment that I was like, I never thought when I started on this career path, one, I did not start on a career path to make my future kids like be able to know what I did. I'm like, these are the skills that people will pay me for. It's a very like much more simple transactional process here. But there is a point of pride when your child can identify, when you're like, I am a senior optimization specialist or something that is like not necessarily inherently understandable by a 5-year-old. I used to work in public relations, but I had that moment where she goes, Daddy, that's what you do. And I got a swell of pride because she knew the somewhat nerdy job that I have. And then she followed that up by going this week to robotics camp, where she
Cool.
spent all week instead of going to the Y camp like she had the first few weeks of summer, she went this week to robotics camp where they make robots with Legos. It is a local like robotics club that they have like a national team, but they have members from the 3 local high schools all compete. But they had the camp for kids 5 years to 13 years. My daughter went. She was the youngest kid there. Nobody else was younger than 6. But she seems to be having a lot of fun, learning a lot, having a good time, and been getting good feedback on how well she's doing. But it's just been the reason we sent her to this is because this said club sets up a booth at the county fair every year. And she went to the booth, saw the robots, saw the flyer about the camp, and she really, really wanted to go. So this was not us just going, hey, STEM, love it now. It was very
Right.
self-driven, and she's very much enjoying it, and I'm very happy for her that she can do the stereotypical, like we talked about the fantastic things, but she loves her ballet, she loves dressing up, she loves tea parties, she loves being a princess, she loves all those things. But seeing her really dig into like the STEM stuff was cool.
Nice. Nice. So my story is more of just a conglomerate of things that have happened the last couple weeks. So this was my almost 2-year-old daughter's 9th school day in the 2-year-old classroom. She will be almost 2, but she's in the 2s. And just in these last 9 days, we've definitely noticed a big difference. Instead of stringing together 2 words like she was before she started, we're getting to 3 words just right there. We also had ballet start back up after a 4-week hiatus. And then this is the last time my youngest daughter cannot participate. So her fear of missing out will end, assuming we get her in a spot when priority registration opens up on Monday. So that's really exciting, which means that I get to start taking ballet on Saturday mornings because it'll be parent accompaniment. So my skills as a balladeer, I think that's a male ballerina, and a gymnast, since I still do parent accompany gymnastics on Sundays, I'm about to get real athletic. So that's super fun. And then today was the first water day of the summer session. So we got some really cute pictures of the girls just each enjoying water day. So that was very nice. And so this would technically be my younger daughter's first water day at school since last year. The 1-year-olds, the almost 1-year-old, the infant class didn't do it. So
Yeah.
this is exciting. It was just some cute stuff. Not quite robotics, but it was still cute.
Not to poo-poo on your athleticism journey.
Mm-hmm,
If I were
mm-hmm,
you and I was going
mm-hmm,
to start somewhere, I might start on the basketball court
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
for just,
Yeah, yeah.
personal reasons.
Personal reasons, yeah. So what Alex is alluding to is a judgment day of sorts.
Sure.
In 3 days' time, I will be live streaming a free throw shooting contest where I need to make 6 out of 10, including the 10th shot. So I can have 5 and then make that 10th and win, or I can make my first 9 and miss the 10th and lose. But what's on the line here is my place in the fantasy football league for this upcoming season, where I am up for 1 year of banishment, and it all comes down to free throws. Maybe we'll do a supplemental podcast on my thoughts about free throws and the results of this. We'll see.
I think we're gonna see how this goes, right? I need to see, the standard is what, 6 of 10 plus a money ball?
6 of 10, including the money ball.
Yeah, right. So 6 of 10, and then the money ball at the end, make it or go home. All I'm hoping for, and I said this in our group chat, but I'm hoping for it to be close, right? If you not
for me to be 5 of 9 going into the 10th shot.
I mean, like a 4 for 8, 5 for 8, somewhere in there. Like I want a little bit of sweating. But if you come out 5 for 5, then it's just sort of like, then there's always pressure on the Powerball, or the money ball or whatever we're calling it. But yeah, I'm excited. I will be excited if we can grab that video and hopefully, we can send that to you guys. Might post it here on YouTube with a little commentary on Ethan's free throw form.
Maybe a more expansive background into how we got to this point.
Yeah.
But
anyway, should we go ahead and hit the town?
Yeah. So when Alex and I first started brainstorming this podcast, this was one of the topics that we had thrown out and never quite got around to. But for those of you listening, you have probably been in a situation where you were choosing between going out with some friends or staying home with your partner and the kid you need to watch. And it could just be, you were going to go out after bedtime anyway, but you realize that your kid has a tendency to wake up multiple times throughout the night, and that sometimes happens in the first couple hours of sleep, right when you'd be out having a good time. Or you're really excited to go out, but your partner was really excited to snuggle up on the couch with you and watch a video or a movie. Why did I say video? A movie, because the two of you haven't had a chance to do that in a while. But ultimately, this episode is about the guilt or non-guilt associated with taking time for yourself that is not productive in the sense of going to therapy or exercising or doing something for your own mental or physical health. This is just you going out and this is just you socializing alone.
Yeah.
So
and alone, socializing alone. No, socializing without your family, and particularly, usually, I think what we're referring to is your significant other. But I think it's an interesting topic because it is one of the more common ways that my wife and I get out of the house, right? Is doing our own thing. But because we very rarely have enough time where we have childcare for both kids at a time we want to go out. Like we've got the childcare pretty much locked down for our workday, and asking our moms for any more than that sometimes feels a little greedy for date night. But when you have a built-in parent at home, the idea of going out can seem maybe a little bit more accessible. I don't know.
That's true. So as I mentioned to Alex before we started recording, I've actually evolved on this position. So
I don't know what your original position was. So I think, where did you start and where'd you end up?
Right. Yeah. I was right getting into that. So
I'm sorry.
it's okay. My wife and I became parents in November of 2019. So right before the pandemic. And however, that first couple of months, I wasn't really going out. I remember the first time I went out, I grabbed happy hour with a mutual friend of ours right after work. And when I came home, it was the longest my daughter had not seen me by 2 extra hours, and she didn't smile when I walked in. So I thought I just ruined everything and she forgot me. That was an actual thought. I was
expecting.
No, so that was an actual thought that I didn't know I was going to have. But then it became kind of clear that, as the breastfeeding continued, as little glimpses of postpartum, emotions came through, that my presence was needed. And in the instances, that was a really weird way to say and in the instances that I wanted to go out, I felt like I couldn't at times. And there really was guilt associated with it. And I very much was uber cognizant of how long I was gone. I really wish I hadn't been, because then the world shut down and there was no going out at all for either of us. But once things just started opening up again, our lives really were entirely different. We lost touch with some people. There were folks that had different, risk thresholds with regard to the virus than we did. And, we were both restless in our own kind of way. So I felt a lot of guilt every time that I wanted to go out. And most of the time, maybe 9 out of every 10 times I wanted to go out, I ended up not, for one reason or another that I would come up with, where, well, I'm still not ready to take the metro because of all the people. And, by the time I got there in my car, I'd have to turn around and leave, and all these excuses that I would come up with.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of guilt. That was my original position. Now, even though there's 2 kids and, and we don't necessarily need childcare, it is more just, I no longer care as much about it, because we're at the point where anytime my wife wants to go out, I'm all for it. I usually encourage it. But ultimately, I go out so much more because I just think about the fact that it's not always my fault, and this is going to sound bad, but it's not always my fault that I have more options to go out than my wife. And I should not make myself hold back because I know that she would like to go out too as often as me. But at the same time, there are certain moments where she but wants to stay in anyway, even though she's got some friends getting together. So it just kind of, I just shifted a bit.
I think that's an important distinction there, right? Because I think it matters, right? I think I'm in the camp. I don't want to act like I go out a ton, right? This is a couple times a month, maybe. And usually it's around homebrew club event, but it's probably more often than my wife goes out by a little bit. But I think the important thing for us, and this is sort of my overarching thought about it, is I think it's just an area that is always ripe for more communication, right? Because I think it's what are you upset about? Are you upset that I am going out and leaving you to parent? If you don't think that's fair, fine, let's talk about that and let's figure out a solution. But are you upset that I'm getting invited to places to go and you're not? That's not on me, right? That's on either your initiative or your friends, or taking some time to find other places that you can go out, or you saying yes to the opportunities that are available, which I get. I think the last time, this June meeting that I had for the homebrew club, it's they had the meeting. I knew it was on the calendar. I knew I could go. And that day I was just not feeling it. And I didn't go. And I recognized that I was making that choice not to take the opportunity, but that I have to I think there was some work that went in there, because I think it was a very natural reaction, previously, to conflate those feelings of like, man, I could really use a break with like, I never get a chance to take a break.
Mhm.
And that's
Right.
not the same thing. If you get chances and you're not taking them, my position is you kind of lose the right to talk about it. But I also think that like it's definitely something that should be fair and equitable on the opportunity front. What
Mhm.
you do with those opportunities, I think, is sort of completely up to you. But the
100%.
communication of just like, what are you comfortable with? Like, not necessarily setting a curfew, but like, hey, what time do you need me home and why do you need me home at that time, and is it just to know that I'm safe? Because if so, like, my wife will have me just like send a text when I'm on my way home leaving those meetings, because sometimes I'm leaving at like 9:15, 9:30, and maybe they're 20 minutes away or something, and like she just wants to know because she's going to be asleep and maybe she'll have woken up and be like, oh, he's not home yet. I wonder if everything's okay. Right.
Mhm.
And, if I happen to show up later because I'm in a conversation with somebody and just lose track of time, I want her to know like that I'm on the way. But getting down to that, like, okay, what are your concerns with how late, with whether I'm going or what time I'm coming back or
Mhm.
where I'm going or how I'm getting there, and then working to alleviate that. But I think a lot of people get into this like, I just need a break. I need to go out and like get into almost a combative thing where any sort of, well, can you check in with me? And it's like coming from a place of caring can be seen as like nagging or not letting you have your freedom. And I'm like, maybe it is. I can't speak to every person, every relationship. But I think if you ask the question, like, what's your actual concern? And then you can work to alleviate those a little better. And that seemed to work for us.
Yeah, so it's funny. I'm actually more of the one who cares about the checking in on arrival and about to go,
Yeah.
because sometimes, my wife will go out when I do encourage her to go. And, one common thing is in our younger daughter's class, there's a single mom, and she likes to host wine night once a month because she doesn't have a partner to
Sure.
leave the kid with
It's a
and go
great.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so everybody's fine. And so she hosts. She usually provides like snacks or something, most of the wine. And then you know we have a classmate who lives in our same townhouse community. So that mom usually drives my wife over, and again, it's only a mile. But the last time my wife went, I just never heard from her, because
Yeah.
normally she's right on the, hey, all right, we got there, whatever. And she was gone for about 3 hours. And I send a simple text like, hey, did you guys drink yourself to death? Just is everything okay? And then once I know all's good, it's just like, yeah, you guys made it there, right? So for me, it's more just like, I like to know they got there, and then I don't have to think about it until the end. And then when they let me know they're coming back, I'm like, great, cool. Now I know that I'll see you in like 5 minutes, and that's
Right.
it.
And it's
So,
it's coming from that place of caring. And I also do the same thing where sometimes, like if my wife's out late, then I sometimes have a little bit more trouble going to sleep. Like I just want to check in with her because she
mhm,
wants me to check in. She's not great about checking in. And this was something
mhm,
we had to work
mhm,
on. Initially, when we first got married, we lived in New York. And my wife worked at a startup and she worked in Manhattan. I worked from home when we first got married. And like she and her startup coworkers, it's kind of startup where they had a chef on staff. And so they like cooked lunch and then could eat leftovers for dinner, right? And if you got in early enough, the chef would cook you breakfast. And you're just sort of like, wow, you never have to leave. And then you sort of think about the morbid corporate overlord and go, wow, you never have to leave.
mhm.
This is problematic. But what that did lead to is the coworkers just being around each other, working a little late, grabbing some food. Next thing you know, one thing leads to another. You're in Manhattan. Like it is not hard to get from your office to dinner to a bar, like
Mhm.
without much effort,
Right.
with very little effort. I mean, this is something I'm sure you experience as someone who works, in DC, where it's just like when you go into the office and you want to grab something after work, you got a plethora of options to grab some food and grab a drink. Finding a beer is not hard, especially if you're not being particular about where.
Right.
But, and so that would lead to, oh, she'd stay out and one thing lead to another. And we didn't have kids at this time. Right. So it'd just be sort of like, yeah, I'm just chilling, and I had friends and like I would go out and do stuff, but not with the frequency or ease of access that she had, where it was just like, I'm going out, like after work, before I get home, I don't have to touch home and reset and go out. Whereas now we both work from home. We don't always dress up very much, like we would as if we were going out, depending on, what our meeting schedule looks like that day and who we're talking to. Right. You ever do that one where you're like, I got to talk to a higher up today. Better put on the good shirt. That kind of mentality. But that's where we're at in 2024. So going out means getting ready, getting prepped.
Oh yeah.
Getting to the bar, getting to the location, right? And I know you go into the office every now, once a week, but for those of us that don't have any sort of like central place and coworkers that like my coworkers are all over the United States. The closest coworkers I have, I've never even talked to because I work in a big company and they're 45 minutes away. So,
Right.
it's just, it's not the same vibe, but again, I think that it's usually being on both sides of it. I can say that the worry comes from a genuine place, not a like, is there infidelity going on, or is she, getting too drunk, or is she dangerous? Like, is she doing something dangerous? Like, it's never that. It's never that worst case scenario. No, that's built on a decade plus of trust, of like that stuff never happening. So I have never had a reason to consider it happening. That helps. I think that helps a lot. Like, if you don't have a relationship built on trust, I would say communication is even more important. But yeah, I think that's my big thing, is just getting back to the, like, you have those conversations and you know why the person's checking in, because I would feel that when my wife would text me and she'd be like, you're always coming home. I'm like, it feels like you're nagging me, but maybe you're not trying to like insert yourself, or it's not FOMO, that it's just legitimate. Like, hey, I care about you as a human being and I'd like to know that you're safe and when I can expect you home, just so I feel
right
at ease. I'm like, okay, that's
right.
fine.
And the, what's funny is, so my wife, like you mentioned, I go into the office roughly once a week, Wednesdays usually, and then I'm supposed to go in most Mondays, but I don't always do. But my wife has to go in Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
But she also, is quote unquote early shift, which there are 3 shifts at her job. There's the 7:30 to 4, the 8 to 4:30, and the 8:30 to 5. She's the early shift because just the way the metro lines up, she's not waking up much earlier to get there, but that extra 30 minutes early dismissal to get home means she actually gets more time with the kids.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. But because she has all that access to downtown Washington, D.C. and her friends and coworkers, and they do go out, I always encourage her to go out more, and she doesn't go out as much. And, part of the encouragement is, general care for her well-being and wanting her to have a social life and wanting her to feel like she has a life outside of our family.
Sure.
But it's also kind of like a CYA, because every time I encourage, I kind of like bank it also for when I want to go out,
right. Right. You remember that, because I think offering those opportunities is really important. And I think people change, right? I talked about my wife, going out quite a bit when we lived in New York. And, again, I don't want to make it sound like quite a bit is 4 or 5 nights a week, but, Thursday, Fridays kind of, why not?
Right. Why not?
And that's obviously changed as she, like us, works primarily at home, and doesn't have a bunch of young coworkers to like go out with and hang out with. And we got to a point that around her birthday in 2023, so last year, my son is about his birthday is about 2 weeks after hers. And so her birthday was coming up. Son was about 1 year old. And I decided for her birthday, she had not like gone out. She'd just been doing a lot of like momming. She had 12 weeks paid maternity leave. She took it. She'd just been like mom duty all the time. And so I got 3 of her closest friends together. I coordinated with them to all meet at the same place at a bar downtown. And she and I went out to dinner. She had no clue. And then I dropped her off at the bar, much to her surprise. And like my mom was caring for our son. I guess my daughter was doing a sleepover with my mother-in-law or something. But I went, or maybe my daughter was doing a sleepover with my mom. And I just grabbed my son and took my son home, and my daughter stayed there. But anyway, it was like, I'll grab our son. You're going to have a girls' night. No curfew. I'm not going to check in with you. Text me when you're on your way home, but I don't care what time that text comes in, kind of thing. And it was about the time that The Last of Us had premiered, because I think it probably a couple episodes in, because I woke up at 1:30 to my wife sitting in the bathtub. We've got one of those like wooden bamboo trays that extends across your bathtub. You can put stuff. She had her phone there with a bowl of ramen noodles, and she had subscribed to HBO Max, which we had not been previously subscribed to as of like 11 o'clock that night when I went to bed. She'd subscribed to HBO Max and like drunk as a skunk watched a couple episodes of a zombie show and was like, I'm having trouble going to sleep. I'm like,
yeah, I wonder why.
I wonder why this is a struggle for you. But the actual moral of that story is, to all the guys out there, that is a heck of a birthday party to plan. If you want to surprise her with a girls' night, she's going to enjoy it, and you don't have to like chaperone. If you're just like dropping off, it's like, you don't have to manage whether she drinks too much. You don't have to sit there making. I like her friends, don't get me wrong. So if any of them are listening, sure, I have no problem making small talk with you, but you guys get to talk about the girl stuff instead of feeling like you got to entertain me because I'm the tag along husband. And I'm like, right. And one of the significant others of one of the girls coming, he was like, man, Alex really knocked us out of the park. He planned a whole birthday party that he didn't even have to go to. Like, this is a baller move. And I was like, yeah, this is pretty baller. So highly recommend that for anybody that, wants to try that. Give your wife. I mean, obviously there's a childcare implication there. You do have to take care of your children, but like, I was feeling, a little introverted. I got my son in bed by 8. I knew my wife wasn't going to be home before midnight. I just had like 3 hours. She's turned the sports up a little bit louder, belch a little bit louder after I sipped the beer, that kind of stuff, unbutton the pants, all that. Just get real comfortable.
Wow, you still wear pants with buttons?
Yeah, like khaki shorts and stuff.
Oh, see, I'm just in various shorts all day long.
There's some.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. So also another thing, one of the reasons I love when my wife goes out is because, as I mentioned, I think before on this podcast, my daughters behave so much better when it's one of us instead of two of us.
Yeah.
And every single time my wife goes out, I will text her usually 30 plus minutes before bedtime's over normally and just say, both girls asleep at this time. And I know that it's kind of just it's not a dig per se, but it's definitely now I get a night to myself, which, to be honest, is what I really wanted in the first place. So,
and I will say that's sort of the secret sauce. If you can prep yourself and go, hey, I get these kids to bed, like any reasonable kid's bedtime is going to be well before a grown-up comes back from going out. You get some time to yourself. You want to watch that trashy movie that your spouse would make fun of you for suggesting, you watch it. You order the takeout that your spouse never wants to order. You order it. Like, you have yourself that night that you want to have. And I think so. I think that can be sort of an advantage because, you know, like but then I think, you know, another one that's interesting where you sort of graduate from that level of like the night of going out to where we're going in a couple weeks to like vacations, right?
Mhm.
Going on a trip. And I think you've gone on a couple of work trips since, you know, at least your oldest has been born. But I think there's something different about like a social trip where, you know, it's like, I'm not getting paid, you know, like me going on this trip
Right.
doesn't help pay the mortgage.
So I've only been on one work trip since the kids were born, and it was when both of them were born. But I went to a family wedding solo, and you know, so that was just kind of like, yeah, I'm going out. I'm gonna be sharing a room with my brother. We're gonna have a brother's night that we rarely ever get to have, and that's, you know, and then we're just gonna rage at a wedding. It was just a, you know, it was a debaucherous, but you know, it was, you know, what was it? What am I trying to say here? It was, I informed that was gonna happen, so it was kind of like conscience is clean.
Once again, I think it's expectations, but I think this is, you talked about keeping things in the bank, right? You know, like when you say yes to something, you put it in the bank. If you'll recall, in December when we started planning this guys trip, I initiated it with a message that was like, hey guys, we need a trip. Basically like, hey, there seems to be a lull in creating new humans that would tie up our resources. We should do a guys trip. It was because my wife had planned a trip with her friends to go to El Salvador, and she had a great time. She enjoyed it. You know, it was like a long weekend. I took care of the kids. We did our thing. We you know, this was in February of this year. So my son was almost 2. So, you know, we managed it. We're good to go. And I put that in the bank. You know, as soon as she asked about that trip, I was like, okay, that's on the table now. Like I was very much like, she asked about it. And that was like the first time that it hadn't been like, I need to go to a conference, or, you know, she has wanted to go to some like continuing ed type things, or, you know, any sort of work trip where it's like, oh, or a wedding, or, you know, because like I went to a family wedding similar to you where like the kids weren't invited. And so my wife didn't go. And so that's one thing, but that's sort of like, somebody asked me to go. This is this is like initiating the trip. And as soon as she asked about it, I was like, oh, that's on the table. We're now doing trips with friends. Okay, sign me up for that. I need to get one of those on the books.
So
that was actually the genesis of this, was me going, okay, we've put this on the table, and I want to turn.
Yeah, so my wife actually did the same thing. I think she went for happy hour with her 3 college friends that are local, and she came home and she said, the 4 of us are going to Brazil in 2027. And I said, okay. And she goes, and it's because you've got this guys trip coming up. And I didn't say this to her, but I said, these are completely unequal trips. Just so you say, I basically, if we're gonna, you know,
we're going on the 2024 trip and the 2025 trip and the 2026 trip,
and then your 2027 to Brazil is, you know,
I think
justified.
And I think it's also one of those things that once you get over that hump and you can communicate with your spouse that that's something that you're interested in doing, and you feel comfortable, because I think it's really helpful, right? And it was really helpful for me to know that it was an okay thing to do. Is when I thought about it, my wife asked about going to El Salvador. She goes, what do you think? And I said, give me 24 hours, because I didn't want to give her a gut answer right away. I wanted to sleep on it a little bit. Like, how much would this suck? Not can I do it, right? We've established in the like solo dadding, super dad episode that it's like, we obviously have the skills to keep our kids fed and alive for forever should the worst happen, right? But the like, is my inconvenience so much that I feel like it's unreasonable for you to ask this, is really where we're setting the
Right.
bar. And once you realize you've cleared that, then I think it's sort of putting in that perspective of like, well, if I could do it, then I think it's a fair ask of my spouse.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's probably the best way to open the conversation. Well, if the tables were turned, I'd let you do it. But
Mhm.
I think it
Sure.
is a conversation to have in that way of like, this is something I would like to do.
Yeah.
And if it's something you would like to do, I'm open to you doing something similar, obviously at a different table.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, so my wife loves going to Comic-Con, or as it's called in DC, Awesome Con. So she and one of her best friends are going to New York Comic-Con in the middle of October or something. So she
Fine.
asked me, and she was just like, "Can I go?" And I instantly was just like, "Yeah, whatever." I thank you for the notice, put it in the calendar, and I will know not to book anything, and I'll just figure it out. So that's just
My,
where I'm at now.
my wife has this weird quirk. This sort of reminded me of something because it was going to be a like offhanded suggestion of like, why don't you take the kids? Like as a joke. But my wife has done this thing. There is this conference continuing ed thing in the personal trainer space that she's wanted to go to for some time. It's in LA, happens every year. She's wanted to go and she's never pulled the trigger, just life stages or like not thinking that maybe she's in the right spot where it'd be the most useful for her. She always wanted to go, and she pitched going last year. And she pitched the idea of going to the conference in LA, but us all going. And like I would hang out with the kids for a few days and then we'd have a couple of family days. And she pitched this to me, and I just sort of gave her this blank stare of like, you want me to parent my kids, but just away from the house,
Right.
away from home court where I know where the snacks are, I know where the band-aids are, I know where the toilet is, like I know where the bed is. Like, you want me to fly with the kids across the country and then you be tied up and
Mhm.
I'm basing operations out of a hotel room in a city that I don't really
Right.
know.
So what's interesting is, so my parents actually used to do that with me and my brother, but only when the city was conducive for that thing. So, for example,
I would do
this
that with
is not
older kids. I wouldn't do that with
right.
my son
Right.
who needs to nap. That was my big
No, no,
thing. It's
no.
just like I
Right.
don't want to be tied down to having to have him nap in a hotel room, and I've also got to
Sure.
watch our daughter and keep her quiet in the same hotel room. Ugh.
Right. No. I get that, but like for example, yes, a little bit older, but for example, and this isn't that big of a deal to you because you live in Florida, but like when my mom had a conference in Orlando, my dad was like, "Oh, I'll take the kids to Disney World."
Sure,
Now, you might be thinking, "Ethan, you're from Los Angeles. There's Disneyland.
sure.
Why would that matter?" It wouldn't work for you because you go to Los Angeles. At best, you're driving 50 miles each way to Anaheim, where Disneyland is, depending on where you are in LA. So it's not even like just the same geographic, like convenience kind of thing. So I think
I have to say
look,
that sounds closer than a cross-country flight
sure, but if you're already doing the cross country flight
with
and
4
then
people. Like,
with
this is
four
the thing, you're
people,
adding hundreds
yeah,
of dollars
exactly.
in plane tickets to save a 50-minute drive. That's what you're telling me.
Sure. No. What I'm saying is, if so, I do know that this particular Orlando trip happened when it was before my brother was born. So
Okay.
they flew. So my dad and I flew because I also needed to be accessible to my mother for breastfeeding and some other stuff. So, but my dad still took me to Disney World with some bottles of breast milk and diapers. Funny part of that story was my dad actually interrupted my mom's work because I ended up having diarrhea all over my dad when he was holding me over his shoulders, and legitimately walked into my mom's business meeting covered in my poop, being like, "I need you right now." Which,
Yikes.
considering my mom was presenting to a bunch of men at the time, it didn't impact her career at all. All the men were just like, wow, that poor little trooper getting pooped on by his kid. Yeah, we will pause this presentation until everything is taken care of. Man, the late 80s were a wonderful time.
Yeah. I mean, that is so to the point at hand. Yeah, I think if there were cities that we thought were conducive for the kids, we might take them. But I think for us, it's a really big thing that the scenario you just talked about in that sort of scenario, if you're under 2, you're only adding your dad's ticket. But when my wife proposed this, it was like we'd pay for my daughter's ticket, my ticket, and I think my son would have been free. But we're just like, that's a lot of money to spend. We need a bigger hotel room. Like you can't split with somebody going to the conference. We have to get our own hotel room and pay for the whole thing. And we have to pay for at least 2 more flights, a lot more food, activities, supplies. We're definitely not going to be able to fly across the country. Yeah. So it was a no. For
not
me.
worth it.
I'm like, I could see a scenario like my mom, when I was 13 years old, pulled me out of school because she was going to a conference in Vegas. And so as a 13-year-old, I got to go to Vegas and she went to her conference and I just got to like hang out in Vegas, which found out is not like super accessible for a 13-year-old, but is like also not super inaccessible.
Were you at any of the hotels that had arcades?
I was at the Luxor. Right?
Okay, yeah. So they also, the Luxor also has that train to Excalibur because they have the same owner. And the Excalibur, I'm just saying the Excalibur arcade is baller.
Yeah, I know the Luxor very well. It's where we also, as you obviously well know, where we stayed for my bachelor party. So the first 2 times I'd been to Vegas, I'd only ever stayed at the Luxor. So I was like,
interesting.
The Luxor must be where everything happens. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think they just have good deals on room. So, and then but I've been to a lot more of the hotels in Vegas, but as a 13-year-old, just sort of walking the strip, I will tell you the like prostitute pamphlets that litter the bushes were exciting for a 13-year-old.
Sure.
Out his mom just down the strip at like 9:30 in the morning. Vegas is a weird city at 9:30 in the morning, man. But
it's true. I think it was 11:30 at your bachelor party, an 11:30 a.m. walk with one of the other friends who will be going on this guy's trip with us, where some random person on the strip mistaken me for Jeremy Lin. And if those of you who do not know, Jeremy Lin, or of Linsanity, for one epic week of high scoring points for the Knicks, is an Asian American former NBA player. And for some reason, this guy on the strip thought I was him.
There are a lot of things you could have said, right? Like if you wanted to go with NBA player, you could have said Brian Scalabrine. If you wanted to go with like Vegas locality, you could have been like Carrot Top. There are a lot of options there. Jeremy Lin is not making the top 12,000.
But to him, I looked like Jeremy Lin, and I think I made his day. So,
congratulations.
Yeah, Vegas is a wonderful place.
Yeah. All right. Should we work on the dad bod a little bit?
Yeah, let's work on the dad bod. So, 2 weeks ago when we recorded, as those of you heard, I was 149.8. I then went up to last week. I was 180. No, sorry. I was 184.8. Then I went up to 185.6. I am now back down to 185.2. We got through our heat wave, so I am down 0.4 pounds. I've been able to get back to my longer distance running. Actually, today was my longest jog to date since I've been in this kick, where I set my goal weight. I wish I had gone just like 2 more steps before turning my Apple Watch off, because today I finished at 3.99 miles. I didn't know what I was there. Had I known, I would have really pushed it an extra 2 steps to get that 4th mile complete. But I got 3.99 miles in somewhere in the 36-minute range, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. It was a really useful lunch break. I then ate my lunch at my desk. But yeah, and as far as the competition of trying to get into the top 100 out of over 1,000 people in the steps competition, as of entering yesterday's steps, I was at number 128. It is tough. It's going to be tough to get into that top 100. I have, I think, 670,000 steps since May. The guy currently in first place has almost 3 million. I don't know what he's doing, but I think he's cheating.
What's the guy in 100th place got? That's what you need to focus
on. The guy in 100th place is got about 50,000 steps on me. So
you can do that.
It's doable,
but it's doable. Not easy. It's gonna you gotta. Here's the thing: you gotta make up 50,000 steps plus whatever steps.
Right. So I gotta take more phone calls on my feet. I gotta find new opportunities to get up and walk around. So working on it. Yeah. How about you?
So I this week weighed in at 180.4. So I'm still doing my maintenance thing. Gained a little bit of weight, probably some water weight because my weight was it jumped up kind of 2 pounds in a day. So I don't think, pretty hard to gain 2 pounds of fat in a day. But anyway, so I'm feeling pretty good, but just kind of cruising on maintenance mode right now. Like I said, once we, this is our last sort of day before episode before our trip. So the next time we record one of these, the next time you hear one of these, I'll have given some more thought to sort of what's next in my fitness journey, because I've been doing a little bit of maintaining on the calories, and I've been focusing on certain areas of where I want to get stronger. But I'm just going to kind of see where I'm at after the guys trip, because I've been just enjoying the mental break from being so vigilant about counting my calories, and I've counted them less and less, and it has not impacted the scale, but that has come with intuitive eating. It has not been just me taking the reins off. It's been me thinking about all the things I've eaten, because even just cataloging it in my mind and knowing from all the time we spent calorie tracking about where I'm at on my macros and about where I'm at on my calories, that process makes me feel more full. If I can calculate it up in my head and that number comes to 1,500 or 1,800 after dinner time, I feel more full than if I calculate the number and I'm 1,200, 1,300, 1,400, and I'm I feel hungry when I know I have more calories. It absolutely sends hunger cues to my body. And so I'm even just that, cataloging it and then putting a number on it helps me of going, okay, I have used other cues to try and say that I'm full. That's not the only thing. I'm not saying that's the only thing I do, because that would not be intuitive eating. But it is a supplement to the intuitive eating of if I'm feeling peckish after dinner, when I typically late night snack and can easily add in a few hundred calories that I probably didn't need for sustenance, that's when I go through, what have I eaten today?
So I had a moment like that tonight where I don't want to say I actively ignored intuitive eating, but we had talked long ago when we first started this segment on the example was pizza, where I could eat 5 slices of pizza and have the meat sweats. This is, I think, a direct Alex quote. Or I could have 3 pieces of pizza, feel full, and not have meat sweats. So tonight I put 3 pieces of pizza on my plate, and I was sitting there, and the 2 girls had finished eating. They were playing. I was sitting there. My wife was still eating, and I got bored and I grabbed a 4th slice. And I just, after I ate it, I started eating it and thought, I didn't actually want this 4th slice. But then, it was in my hand. It tasted good. So I finished it. Yeah. I didn't put it down. But it was a moment in real time where I thought, I shouldn't have been doing this. I should not have given in to the boredom. But
yeah, I have that. And pizza is still usually the culprit for me, whether I make it or order it. It's just really easy to pick up another slice, and so I get that. But I think there are one tactic that I've heard from some people, and I would say this is what I would call a moderate. Sorry to everyone that just heard that. I clicked my watch against the mic. But one tactic I've heard is the idea of, saving your calories a little bit. And I think this can only be done. And I think you should get more expert resources on this and not just go on my 2 cents on the idea of saving your calories. But like, if you know that you were going to have a big dinner, right? Like if you know it's going to be a takeout night, or you're cooking something really heavy, or you're going to a party, eating a little bit less at breakfast, eating a little bit less at lunch. The problem comes from then you build up more hunger, and you're more hungry, and that can be easy to overeat. And so you have to like save those calories, but save it in not the like carte blanche, I can eat whatever I want because I've been good mentality, but like,
Right.
I have a little more wiggle room that if I have that 4th slice of pizza, I'm fine. If I have 8 slices of pizza, it wouldn't have mattered what I did. But if I have the 4th, I have the bandwidth to do that. And so it does come that thing of like, if you're going to overeat a little bit, it can save you. If you're going to overeat a lot, it can sometimes feel like a hall pass to do whatever you want. And so that's why it's a little bit more of an advanced tactic, because like, I don't want to sit there and go, yeah, everybody could totally do that because it's just calories in, calories out. Like, no, it's a psychological move.
Sure.
I have been able to pull several times, but it is not the easiest. It's not the easiest thing to make sure you don't overeat.
Right. And I will say, I actually did have a really good day up until that slice. That unprepared, that slice I did not prepare to eat. So it's not gonna kill me. I actually, according to my app, that extra slice put me at literally 3 calories over my deficit. Or, I went 3 calories over even with the workoup.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, that's pretty good. Back and then I had some mead. So here we are.
I think, well, mead aside, I think you could,
I'm not
meet your step goals and your calorie burning goals.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. But
all right.
Yeah. And this was unintentional, but this segment ran a little long. When I was on the phone with my dad on Monday, he made a comment about how he can tune out this part because he's not as worried about his dad bod as the rest of the topics of the episode. So, Dad, if you've been tuning in and out, just know I elongated this for you, and now I'm calling you out on it. So when you tell me you listened to this episode, I'm going to ask specifically what you think of this segment. So here we are.
All right, guys. Well, on that super normal note, we will catch you in, what will it be, Ethan? Help me with the math. 3 weeks.
In 3 weeks, you will get a live recording. The next 2 weeks, you will have pre-recorded data, so you will not get working on the dad pod.
Doing a cookout draft, and then the week after that is to be determined. Tentatively, we will be coming with some video critiques of Ethan's free throw shooting savant display that's coming. If nothing else, I'm going to grab the video and post it on TikTok or something. So
there we go.
Yeah. All right, guys.
All right.
Catch you later.
Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.